Once again, let's look at God's kingdom of 1,000 years has approached. And it said not only was the regularity in serving the spiritual food a problem, but the quality of the food itself was to be considered. The serving of food, the right sort of food at the proper time was the issue. It had to be, according to this, that a decision must be rendered by the returned master. Oh, here it is in a nutshell. The Master Jesus comes in 1918, 1919, and he turns his attention in judgment of the servant. Now his blessing, which is his appointing them as a faithful and discreet slave, this depends on the quality of the spiritual food being distributed by them at this time. This is the only way that they can be appointed as the faithful and discreet slave. The only way they can get the master's blessing is dependent on the quality of the spiritual food being distributed by them at this time. So it's time for us to examine the spiritual food that Jesus examined. As I brought out in part 1, this book, The Finished Mystery, was the one and only book that was distributed by them during this crucial time of judgment. The spiritual wisdom that was distributed in 1918 and 1919 in this book, as they say, had to be the basis for God and Jesus appointing them over all his belongings, including all the Jehovah's Witnesses, thus making them the one and only true religion of God. That is what makes it so interesting, how this book has not been read by any of the current Jehovah's Witnesses. It is not available to buy from Watchtower, and it cannot be viewed in Kingdom Hall libraries. Yet this book is the proof that Watchtower is the only true organization of God. Apparently, these men did not anticipate the eBay or anticipate online libraries like archive.org, but thankfully we have those, and so we can view this wonderful book. First, there are 2 predictions I'd like to read you. This is from page 485, and it says, also in the year 1918, when God destroys the churches wholesale and the church members by millions, it shall be that any that escape shall come to the works of Pastor Russell to learn the meaning of the downfall of Christianity. And then on page 542, towards the bottom, it says, as the fleshly-minded apostates from Christianity, aiding with the radicals and revolutionaries, will rejoice at the inheritance of desolation that will be Christendom's after 1918, so will God do to the successful revolutionary movement. It shall be utterly desolated, even all of it. Not one vestige of it shall survive the ravages of worldwide, all-embracing anarchy in the fall of 1920. This book is riddled with such prophecies as this. Like on page 69 to 71, where there are 88 prophecies, and Jesus' invisible presence was in 1874, not 1914. And the last days began in 1799. And you'll notice to the right it says sections of pyramid passages, because it shows how the Great Pyramid of Giza, the measurements line up with Bible chronology. With all these prophecies, one is reminded of the scripture at Deuteronomy 18:20-22, which says, a prophet who presumes to speak in my name anything I have not commanded him to say must be put to death. But how does one know that this message is not spoken by the Lord? If what a prophet proclaims in the name of the Lord does not take place or come true, that is a message the Lord has not spoken, and the prophet has spoken presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him, for he has no power over you. Now let's take another look at some of the spiritual wisdom from this book. Now on page 93, Nahum 3:3-6 is commented on. It says Nahum was the next one of the holy prophets. And it says that he next tells of an interesting thing that will be a matter of common everyday experience at the time the kingdom is established. He describes a railway train in motion, not an automobile as some think. And if we will be at the trouble to put ourselves in the prophet's place, we can see just what he saw in his vision and what he has so interestingly described. First, the prophet stands looking at the engine coming toward him, and then says, "The shield, the thing ahead of this great warrior, the headlight, is made red, shines brightly. The valiant man, the engineer, and the fireman are dyed scarlet. When the flames from the firebox illuminate the interior of the cab at night, as the fireman opens the door to throw in the coal, the chariots, the railway coaches, shall be preceded by locomotives that at night have the appearance of flaming torches in the day of preparation." Next, the prophet takes his place in the train and looks out of the window, and seemingly the fir trees shall be terribly shaken. The telegraph poles alongside the track seem to be fairly dancing. The chariots shall rage in the streets. A railway is merely an elaborate, scientifically constructed street or highway. They shall just you one against another in the broad ways. The clanking and bumping of the cars together is one of the significant items of railway travel. They shall seem like torches, a railway train at night, rushing through a distant field. Looks like nothing so much as a vast torch going at flying speed. They shall run like the lightnings. Next, the prophet sees the conductor coming for his ticket and says he shall recount his worthies. The conductor spends his entire time almost counting and recounting his passengers, keeping them checked up, etc. They shall stumble in their walk. Try walking on a rapidly moving train. They shall make haste to the wall thereof, to the next city or town. And the coverer, the train shed, the station, shall be prepared. The baggageman, expressman, mail wagon, hotel, bus, intending passengers, and friends to meet incoming passengers will all be there waiting for the train to come. The gates of the rivers shall be opened, the doors of the cars will be opened, and the people will flow out, and the palace car shall be dissolved, emptied. That's end of quote. This truly is unbelievable. It must get better. Right? No, it gets much, much worse. On page 84 and 85, the behemoth and leviathan of Job are identified at great lengths as the steam engine and the railway locomotive. Do you remember in Revelation 16 where God's wrath results in blood as high as horses' bridles for the distance of 1,620 furlongs? Well, let's read what this verse means according to this divinely provided book. As you see, it says, "This cannot be interpreted to refer to the 2,100-mile battle line of the World War. A furlong or stadium is not a mile, and this is without the city, whereas the battle line is within the city." Then it goes on to tell you what the furlong is. It says, "The work on this volume was done in Scranton, Pennsylvania. As fast as it was completed, it was sent to the Bethel. Half of the work was done at an average distance of 5 blocks from the Lackawanna station, and the other half at a distance of 25 blocks. Blocks in Scranton are 10 to the mile, hence the average distance to the station is 15 blocks or 1.5 miles. The mileage from Scranton to Hoboken Terminal is shown in timetables as 143.8, and this is the mileage charged to the passengers. But in 1911, at an expense of $12 million, the Lackawanna Railroad completed its famous cutoff, saving 11 miles to the distance. From the day the cutoff was completed, the trainmen have been allowed 11 miles less than the timetable shows, or a net distance of 132.8. It continues to go on like this throughout the page, saying basically that a furlong is a distance from Pennsylvania to Bethel, but only if you take the Lackawanna ferry. No wonder we have never read not even one example from this book. Truly, in their foolish abundance of words, they have built their scaffold for their own demise. The angel from Revelation 14:15 is identified, and another angel, the witness to the Lord in the land of Egypt, the Grand Pyramid, confirms the Bible teachings that the time of harvest has come, and that was in 1874, if you remember. Then there are 22 measurements of the pyramid to prove it. Revelation 14:17, there's another angel identified, and it's identified as Pastor Russell himself. Also on that page, it speaks of the woman who gave birth to a man-child, and this man-child is no other than the papacy. And it speaks of how war broke out in heaven, and Michael, the archangel, who is identified as the Pope. This book is full of this supposed spiritual wisdom from God. Now here's one more very interesting point from this book. Would you like to know what the physical evidence is that they cite to prove and to corroborate these prophecies? I'm just going to read a few of them for you, but I think you will find it very interesting. Revelation 18 is being interpreted. And it says, quote, "And after these things, another view of the harvesting epoch, I saw another angel, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Some of the glories of the new day discovered since 1874 are adding machines, aeroplanes, aluminum, antiseptics, surgery, automobiles, barbed wire, bicycles, cash registers, cream separators, disc plows, divine plan of the ages, dynamite, North Pole, Panama Canal, pasteurization, South Pole, submarines, skyscrapers, subways, typewriters, wireless calligraphy, and he cried out mightily with a strong, mighty voice." How apt are these scriptures that refer to Pastor Russell as a voice saying Babylon the Great has fallen, indicating that at some time a sudden and utter rejection is to come upon Babylon, such a rejection as we have shown was due in 1874. End of quote. Now think about it. Barbed wire and bicycles are proof of the last days and Christ's return in 1874. This book is God's message of spiritual wisdom. It had to be, according to them, it had to be, according to this book, that a decision must be rendered by Jesus. The evidence is clear and overwhelming beyond any question or argument. Even with accepting those 3 verses in Matthew 24 and Luke 12 about the faithful slave as a prophecy, though common sense shows it's a teaching parable by Jesus, but even so, and even accepting their timetable of 1918 and 1919, even with giving them all that, one would expect some beautiful quality spiritual food that would mightily impress God and Jesus. But as to its spiritual quality, I think you will agree, it proves pathetic to the point of silliness, shameful silliness. It's an insult to common intelligence, and most certainly an insult to Jesus Christ to say he would choose this wonderful book. No wonder they are ashamed to quote it. They're ashamed and they hide it. Now here's another point that some of you may not have thought of. First, I'm going to quote from the Watchtower, November 15th, 1980. It says, "The kingdom class under Jesus Christ is made up namely of 144,000 members. These are atypical Israelites, spiritual Israelites, who are in a new covenant with Jehovah God. Like the Israelites of Isaiah's day, the spiritual Israelites sold themselves because of wrong practices and came into bondage to the world empire of false religion, that is to say, to Babylon the Great and to her worldly paramours. An outstanding instance of this occurred during World War I of 1914 to 1918. So much for the slave's claim of faithfulness during that critical time. That includes 1918. Now, I have 2 important questions for you. The first question is, What were the things that enslaved the Watchtower to satanic Babylon the Great in 1914 to 1918 and caused their unfaithfulness? And question number 2, the critical question, were they free of these things, or were they still enslaved to Babylon and still unfaithful to God in 1919, the final year of God's judgment of them? Jehovah's Witnesses and the Divine Purpose on page 91 answers question 1. It says, they soon realized they had been held in spiritual bondage to in many ways. There were many false doctrines and practices that had not yet been cleaned out of the organization. Not all of them are recognized at once, but gradually over the years that followed it became evident to what extent the brothers had been in Babylonish captivity at that time. With considerable misunderstanding, they had accepted earthly political governments as the superior authorities that God had ordained according to Romans 13:1. And as a result, the witnesses had been held in fear of man, particularly the civil rulers. Besides, many were putting emphasis on so-called character development in the belief that there were certain saving qualities in their self-merit, and there was considerable creature worship in the organization. Furthermore, such pagan holidays as Christmas were being celebrated, and even the symbol of the cross was used as a sign of Christian devotion. And all of this was from the Jehovah's Witnesses in the Divine Purpose, page 91. And if you don't have a copy of this, I will provide a link below where you can read the whole book. Now, on to question 2. Were they free of what they considered enslaving Babylonian corruptions in 1919? And the answer is absolutely not. The truth is, they were still enslaved, so they could never, absolutely never, have been judged worthy of God's blessing as the only true religion. A, because they were still enslaved by their so-called false interpretation of Romans 13:1 and 2 until 1929. That was over 10 years after the window time of judgment had closed in 1919. B, in 1919, their creature worship was actually at a peak regarding Pastor Russell. And C, as for the cross, take a look at this cover from the Watchtower. They were still using this in October 1st, 1931. The first cover of the Watchtower where it was removed was in October 15th, 1931. Now D, as for Christmas, you look at this picture. This is from 1926 in Bethel, and everyone is sitting there. The room is decorated in Christmas decorations, and even Judge Rutherford, all these people have their presents in front of them on the table, and this is in 1926. Now, all of this is to prove that in 1919, by their own words, they were still enslaved to nothing less than what they believed was Babylon the Great. Therefore, it would be absolutely impossible for them to be judged worthy of receiving the greatest award in the history of Christianity in 1919. This truth finds and then hits and disintegrates the very foundation of the huge Watchtower organization. The Watchtower Society is not God's organization. It cannot be God's organization. Accept it. We must accept the truth. There is no room for any doubt or any argument. There can be no serious rebuttal by Watchtower. None. Their claim is fatally impaled on the horns of their own words. To sum up, the Watchtower has sold a grand and fraudulent lie. The Watchtower is not what they claim to be. The Watchtower is a giant fraud. And hopefully Watchtower will have to answer to God for their false prophecies and for the way they have arrogantly and cruelly treated their brothers and sisters. They are responsible for uncounted blood transfusion deaths. They are responsible for stumbling hundreds of thousands who have left the Watchtower with their face shattered, their outlook poisoned, and their families broken up. Now, have I said that everything about the Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses is wrong and corrupt and rotten? Of course not. I know better, and so do you, but their core claim to be God's only organization is totally bogus. From that claim comes the incredible power to control and punish in the name of God. That cult-like claim causes sincere believers to live manipulated and stunted lives, lacking freedom and maturity. The Watchtower's claim allows them to prophesy for God, and without a doubt, they are now proven to be the false prophets. Their worldview is also false, and countless lies have been cramped and deformed as a result of all of this because of that one terrible claim. If ever there was a lingering question of the possibility of Watchtower being the approved organization of God, we now know the truth, and hopefully that concern will never again come into your mind. Once that central truth about the Watchtower is cleared up, you can now re-examine all your beliefs and attitudes that had logically followed from that great and fundamental lie. Jehovah's Witnesses reason because the Watchtower is the one and only organization, all other organizations are wrong, and so they must avoid all connections and participation with them. But now we know absolutely the Watchtower is not and cannot be the one and only organization of God. Therefore, all other groups and organizations are not automatically wrong. So we must reconsider our involvement with them as we search for our meaning and our purpose in life. It's like having a new life. Take a new look at the world. Take a new look at the millions of people who work so hard to help the poor and the blind and the sick. Consider a new attitude toward the people of the world, of mankind, and a new attitude towards your life on this earth. In conclusion, if you, as I, have left the Watchtower, the words of Deuteronomy 18 have special meaning to us. When a false prophet has been exposed and condemned by God, the Bible says, "Be not afraid." For sure, be not afraid of the Watchtower, but also be not afraid of life, of living fully now. Be not afraid of the future, but rather joyfully release the past from your heart, because you are free. You are free at last, and you have peace at last. Thank you for watching. Till next time.